I was cutting into my Sunday pot roast when my mother casually dropped the bomb that would change everything between us. "Oh, Monroe, I almost forgot to mention," she said, passing the mashed potatoes like she was discussing the weather. "Jessica will be moving into your apartment next Tuesday. We already talked to the landlord about adding her to the lease." My fork froze halfway to my mouth as my stepfather Frank nodded approvingly, already planning how my sister would rearrange my furniture. They continued discussing logistics, room arrangements, and how Jessica desperately needed family support after losing another job. I stayed completely silent, letting them map out my life without asking for my input. What they had absolutely no idea about was that I had secretly moved to a beautiful new apartment across town 3 weeks ago, and my old lease was expiring in just 4 days. The conversation around the dinner table continued, as if my opinion was completely irrelevant to decisions about my own living space. My mother Sarah started dividing up responsibilities like a military commander organizing an invasion. "Frank can help move the heavy furniture, and I'll bring cleaning supplies to get Jessica's room ready. Monroe, you'll need to clear out that spare bedroom you use for your computer setup." That spare bedroom comment hit me like a slap. I had transformed that space into a home office where I did freelance programming work that brought in an extra $1,500 a month. The idea that they would just eliminate my income source to accommodate Jessica's latest crisis made my blood boil. But I kept my expression neutral. "Jessica's been through so much lately," Sarah continued, her voice taking on that martyred tone she used whenever defending my sister's poor choices. The breakup with Derek was devastating, and then losing her job at the salon just crushed her spirit. "She needs family right now, Monroe. You understand family obligation, don't you?" Frank leaned forward, his weathered hands clasped together, like he was about to deliver profound wisdom. "Your mother and I have been discussing this for weeks. Jessica can't afford her own place right now, and family takes care of family. You've got that nice 2-bedroom apartment, and you're doing well with your computer job. It's time to step up and be a real man about this situation." I almost laughed at the irony. Frank had remarried my mother when I was 20, and since then he had treated me like his personal project to fix. Never mind that I held down a steady job as a software engineer at a growing tech company, maintained my own apartment, and had never asked them for financial help since graduating college. In Frank's mind, being a real man meant saying yes to whatever my family demanded, regardless of how it affected my life. "We've already worked out all the details," Sarah added, pulling out a notebook filled with her careful handwriting. "Jessica can take the spare room, and we'll split the utilities 3 ways, instead of you paying everything alone. It'll actually save you money, Monroe. Plus, she can help with cooking and cleaning since she'll be home looking for work." I knew exactly what Jessica's idea of helping with cooking and cleaning looked like. During her last stay at my place 8 months ago, I came home from work every day to find dirty dishes piled in the sink, takeout containers scattered across the coffee table, and mysterious stains on my couch that she claimed came from spilled juice. The final straw had been discovering she had been using my apartment as a party location while I was traveling for work, leaving me to deal with noise complaints from neighbors and a security deposit deduction for carpet damage. "She's really changed, Monroe," Sarah insisted, reading some skepticism in my silence. "This whole experience has been a wake-up call for her. Derek was a terrible influence, always encouraging her to spend money she didn't have and quit jobs whenever she felt stressed. Now that she's free from all that negativity, Jessica's ready to focus on building a stable life." I had heard variations of this speech dozens of times over the past 7 years. Jessica was always on the verge of turning her life around, always just one crisis away from becoming responsible and independent. The pattern never changed. She would make poor decisions, face consequences, move in with me while promising to get her life together, gradually become more demanding and less appreciative, then leave abruptly when she found her next boyfriend or opportunity. What my parents never acknowledged was how these cycles affected me. They never asked about the stress of coming home to chaos, the financial burden of supporting another adult, or the way Jessica's presence disrupted my ability to maintain my own routines and relationships. In their minds, I was successful and stable, which somehow made me obligated to fix everyone else's problems. "The moving truck is already reserved for Tuesday morning," Frank announced with finality. "We'll start loading around 8 a.m., and Jessica should be completely settled by dinner time." I called in a few favors, so we'll have plenty of help with the heavy lifting. The casual assumption that my agreement was guaranteed infuriated me more than any direct demand could have. They had planned an entire operation around using my home without ever asking if I consented to becoming Jessica's latest safety net. They had reserved trucks, recruited helpers, and made promises to my sister based on their certainty that I would comply with their wishes. What they had no way of knowing was that exactly 3 weeks earlier, I had signed a lease for a gorgeous one-bedroom loft apartment in the downtown arts district. I had been planning this move for months, carefully saving money and researching neighborhoods where I could build the independent life I had always wanted. The timing of my escape had been perfect. My current lease expired at the end of this month, giving me a clean break from the apartment where my family felt entitled to make decisions. I looked around the familiar dining room where I had sat through countless family meetings about Jessica's latest crisis. The faded wallpaper, the mismatched furniture, the general atmosphere of people who had given up on their own dreams while trying to manage everyone else's problems. This house represented everything I was determined to leave behind. The assumption that family love meant sacrificing your own well-being for others, the belief that success made you responsible for everyone else's failures, and the toxic dynamic where my boundaries were always negotiable but my obligations were set in stone. For the past 3 weeks, I had been living a completely different life that my family knew absolutely nothing about. Every morning, I woke up in my stunning loft apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the bustling downtown arts district. The exposed brick walls, polished concrete floors, and modern kitchen represented everything I had dreamed of having. A space that reflected my personality, rather than accommodating everyone else's chaos. The apartment building was a converted warehouse in the heart of the creative district, surrounded by galleries, independent coffee shops, and the kind of vibrant community I had always wanted to be part of. My neighbors included a documentary filmmaker, a ceramics artist, and a couple who ran a small theater company. For the first time in my adult life, I was surrounded by people who pursued their passions instead of constantly managing family emergencies. My daily routine had transformed completely since the move. I started each morning with coffee on my private balcony, watching the city wake up while planning my day without interruption. The peaceful environment had dramatically improved my focus at work, leading to a breakthrough on a complex software project that had been stalling for months. My supervisor had noticed the improved quality of my code and had already hinted at a potential promotion. The freedom to control my own environment had unleashed creativity I didn't know I possessed. I had set up a proper home office with dual monitors and professional lighting, allowing me to take on more lucrative freelance projects in the evenings. The extra income was already building a substantial emergency fund that gave me security I had never felt while constantly worrying about family financial crises. Most surprisingly, I had started dating someone for the first time in over 2 years. Emma was a graphic designer who worked at a studio 3 blocks from my apartment building. We had met at a coffee shop where I had started working on weekend mornings, and our relationship had developed naturally without the constant interruptions and drama that had sabotaged my previous attempts at romance. Emma knew me as confident, independent Monroe who talked about his work projects and weekend hiking plans instead of family obligation and crisis management. She had no idea that my family expected me to drop everything whenever they faced problems, because in my new life, I had the space and peace of mind to be the person I actually was, instead of the person they needed me to be. Our relationship had progressed beautifully over the past month. Emma had been to my apartment several times, and I could see how impressed she was with the space I had created. She had commented on how the environment reflected my personality, thoughtful, creative, and independent. We had cooked dinner together in my kitchen, watched movies on my comfortable couch, and had long conversations on my balcony under the city lights. The contrast between my relationship with Emma and the family dynamics I had just witnessed at dinner was striking. Emma respected my time, appreciated my efforts, and contributed equally to our growing connection. She never assumed she was entitled to my resources or demanded that I sacrifice my goals to accommodate her needs. Instead, our relationship was built on mutual respect and genuine affection. I had been maintaining this double life by telling my family I was working late or traveling for business conferences. The tech industry provided perfect cover for irregular schedules and remote work opportunities. When they called my old apartment, I explained I was staying at hotels near client sites or working from the office on critical deadlines. The deception had required careful planning, but it was surprisingly easy to maintain because my family rarely asked detailed questions about my work or personal life. They were so focused on their own problems that they never showed curiosity about my daily experiences, career goals, or personal interests. As long as I remained available to solve their emergencies and provide financial support when needed, they were content to know very little about how I actually lived. This realization had been both liberating and heartbreaking. I had spent years believing that my family's demands came from genuine concern and love for me, but their complete lack of interest in my happiness or personal growth revealed a more selfish motivation. They valued me for what I could provide rather than who I was as a person. The new apartment represented more than just a change of address. It was my declaration of independence from a family dynamic that had kept me trapped in a caretaker role since college graduation. Every piece of furniture I had chosen myself, every decision about decor and layout reflected my preferences instead of accommodating other people's needs. For the first time in my adult life, I had created a home that belonged entirely to me. Over the next 3 days, my phone exploded with messages from my family as they finalized their plans for Jessica's move. Sarah sent detailed texts about grocery shopping for Jessica's dietary preferences. Frank shared pictures of furniture arrangements he thought would work best in my spare room, and Jessica herself began making requests that revealed exactly how entitled she felt to my space and resources. "Hey Monroe," Jessica texted Monday morning. "I'm super excited about moving in tomorrow. Can you make sure the Wi-Fi password is something easy to remember? Also, I'll need you to clear out that closet completely, because I have way more clothes than I thought. Thanks, bro. You're the best." The casual assumption that I would rearrange my home to accommodate her belongings made my decision to stay hidden even more satisfying. I could picture her disappointment when she discovered that her backup plan had disappeared, forcing her to face the consequences of her choices without my automatic rescue. My mother called Tuesday morning at exactly 7:30, her voice bright with organizational energy. "Monroe, honey, we're loading the truck now and should be at your place by 9. Jessica is so grateful for this opportunity to get back on her feet. Make sure you're there to help with the heavy boxes, and maybe you could pick up some flowers to welcome her home." I was sitting in my real apartment, drinking coffee on my balcony, while watching the morning rush hour traffic flow through the streets below. The irony of my mother's call was almost too perfect. Here she was, orchestrating an invasion of my supposed home while I relaxed in my actual sanctuary, completely removed from their drama. "I'm actually running errands this morning," I replied truthfully, since I planned to drive past my old neighborhood around the time they would be arriving. "But I'll catch up with everyone later to see how everything went." After hanging up, I drove to a parking spot across from my former apartment building where I had a clear view of the front entrance. I wanted to witness the moment when my family discovered that their carefully planned manipulation had been based on completely false assumptions about my life. At 9:15, Frank's pickup truck arrived, pulling a rented trailer loaded with Jessica's belongings. Behind them came Sarah's sedan and Jessica's beat-up Honda Civic, creating a small convoy of vehicles filled with people who believed they were about to take control of my living situation. I watched Frank jump out to start directing the unloading process, while Sarah organized boxes on the sidewalk according to her color-coded labeling system. Jessica emerged from her car wearing the dramatic expression she always adopted when she wanted people to feel sorry for her circumstances. She surveyed her belongings with the air of someone who had been unfairly victimized by life, rather than someone who had made a series of poor choices that led to homelessness. Her body language communicated that she viewed moving into my apartment as a temporary inconvenience rather than a generous favor from her brother. The family worked efficiently, hauling boxes and furniture toward the building entrance while discussing logistics and room arrangements. I could see Frank gesturing toward windows as he explained his vision for furniture placement, and Sarah checking items off her comprehensive moving list. Their confidence and organization would make their disappointment even more dramatic when they discovered the truth. At 9:45, Frank rang the buzzer for my apartment repeatedly while checking his watch with growing irritation. After several minutes of waiting, he pulled out his phone to call me, and I watched him frown at his device when the call went directly to voicemail. Sarah joined him at the entrance, and I could see them having an animated discussion about where I might be during such an important family event. Jessica's impatience became visible as she paced near her pile of belongings, clearly frustrated that her grand entrance was being delayed by my absence. She kept checking her phone and looking toward the building entrance, as if her staring would somehow make me materialize to solve their problem. The breakthrough moment came when Mrs. Patterson, my elderly neighbor who had always been kind to me, emerged from the building with her small dog for their morning walk. She had lived in the building for 15 years and knew everyone's routine, including the fact that I had moved out 3 weeks earlier with professional movers and genuine excitement about my fresh start. I watched Frank approach Mrs. Patterson with his most charming smile, clearly intending to ask her to let them into the building or provide information about my whereabouts. The conversation lasted several minutes, during which Mrs. Patterson's expression shifted from confusion to understanding as she realized what was happening. From my hidden position, I could see the exact moment when Mrs. Patterson delivered the news that would shatter my family's assumptions about controlling my life. Frank's confident posture deflated like a punctured balloon, and Sarah's organizational energy transformed into panicked disbelief. Jessica stopped pacing and stared at Mrs. Patterson, as if the older woman had spoken in a foreign language. The 3 family members huddled together near Jessica's pile of belongings, their voices rising as they processed the information that their entire plan had been based on outdated assumptions. Frank pulled out his phone to call me repeatedly, while Sarah searched through her purse for backup contact information. Jessica sat down on one of her boxes with her head in her hands, finally confronting the reality that her safety net had disappeared. I felt a mixture of satisfaction and guilt as I watched my family face the consequences of their presumptuous planning. Part of me wanted to rush over and fix their problem, falling back into my familiar role as the family problem solver. But the larger part of me recognized this moment as necessary for all of us. They needed to learn that my life was not their resource to allocate without permission, and I needed to prove to myself that I could maintain boundaries even when they were uncomfortable. My phone rang continuously for the next hour, as my family moved from confusion to panic to anger. I let each call go to voicemail while I drove to my office, knowing that delaying the confrontation would only intensify their emotional response and make the eventual conversation more dramatic. The voicemails started with confusion. Sarah's first message was concerned rather than angry. "Monroe, honey, we're at your apartment but you're not here. And Mrs. Patterson said something about you moving. There must be some misunderstanding. Please call us back as soon as you get this message." Frank's messages quickly escalated to frustration. "Monroe, what the hell is going on? We've got a truck full of Jessica's stuff and nowhere to put it. If you moved without telling us, that's pretty damn selfish considering what your sister is going through. Call me back immediately." By the 4th message, Jessica had taken over the phone with full melodrama. "Monroe, I can't believe you would do this to me right now. I'm literally homeless, sitting on the sidewalk with all my belongings, and you've disappeared without even telling your own family where you live. How could you be so cruel when I need you most? I thought I could count on my brother, but I guess I was wrong about everything." I arrived at my office and settled into my cubicle, reviewing the software project that had been progressing so smoothly since I moved to my peaceful apartment. My colleague David, who managed our development team, noticed my focused productivity over the past few weeks and had scheduled a meeting to discuss potential leadership opportunities. The contrast between my professional growth and my family's crisis was stark evidence that removing their chaos from my life had been the right decision. Around 11 a.m., my concentration was interrupted by voices in the reception area that sounded disturbingly familiar. I looked up from my computer screen to see Sarah marching through the office with Frank close behind, both of them scanning the workspace like bloodhounds tracking a scent. "Excuse me," Sarah announced to our startled receptionist. "We need to speak with Monroe immediately. It's a family emergency." I felt my face flush with embarrassment as my coworkers turned to stare at the commotion. My family had never visited my workplace before, and their dramatic entrance was exactly the kind of boundary violation I had been trying to escape by moving to a new apartment. David emerged from his office to assess the disruption, his professional demeanor intact despite the obvious tension. "Can I help you folks with something?" Frank stepped forward with his chest puffed out, clearly prepared to establish dominance through aggressive masculine posturing. "We're Monroe's parents, and we need to talk to him right now. He's pulled some kind of disappearing act that's left his sister homeless, and we're not leaving until we get answers." I stood up from my desk, knowing that avoiding the confrontation would only make the situation worse for my professional reputation. "It's okay, David. These are my parents. We can talk in the conference room." Sarah immediately launched into her victim narrative as soon as we were seated around the conference table. "Monroe, how could you move without telling your own family? Do you have any idea what Jessica is going through right now? She's sitting in a parking lot with all her belongings because her brother abandoned her in her time of greatest need." Frank leaned forward aggressively, using the intimidation tactics that had worked when I was younger and more easily manipulated. "This is the most selfish, irresponsible thing you've ever done, Monroe. Your sister lost her job, got kicked out of her apartment, and the one person she should be able to count on just disappears like some kind of coward." I felt the familiar pressure to apologize and fix their problem, but something had shifted during my weeks of independence. The peaceful mornings in my apartment, the successful work projects, the healthy relationship with Emma, and the simple pleasure of controlling my own environment had shown me what life could be like without constant family emergencies. "I moved 3 weeks ago," I said calmly, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "I didn't tell you because I knew you would try to talk me out of it or find ways to make it about Jessica's needs instead of my own goals." Sarah's expression shifted from hurt to manipulative as she deployed her most effective guilt strategy. "Goals? What goals could be more important than helping your own sister? We raised you to care about family, Monroe. Your father and I sacrificed everything to give you opportunities. And this is how you repay us?" The reference to my father, who had died when I was 16, was a calculated emotional blow designed to make me feel guilty about disappointing his memory. But instead of crumbling under the manipulation, I found myself analyzing their tactics with new clarity. David knocked on the conference room door and stepped inside with a concerned expression. "Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to make sure everything was okay in here. Monroe, do you need any support with this situation?" Frank turned his aggressive energy toward David, clearly offended that an outsider would interfere in family business. "This doesn't concern you, pal. We're dealing with a private family matter." David remained calm and professional, but his presence gave me confidence to continue standing my ground. "Actually, David, I appreciate you checking. My family is upset because I moved to a new apartment without consulting them first." "That doesn't sound unreasonable," David replied, his tone carefully neutral. "Adults generally don't need family permission to choose their housing." Sarah's eyes widened at the suggestion that my independence was normal rather than selfish. "You don't understand the situation. Monroe's sister is homeless and needs his help. Family takes care of family." David nodded thoughtfully, then surprised everyone by sharing his own experience. "I actually went through something similar with my family a few years ago. They expected me to solve everyone's financial problems because I had a stable job, but it was preventing me from building my own life. Setting boundaries was the best decision I ever made." Frank's face reddened at the implication that their expectations might be unreasonable. "So you think Monroe should just abandon his sister when she needs help most?" "I think Monroe should help his sister by encouraging her independence rather than enabling her dependence," David replied calmly. "Constantly rescuing someone prevents them from developing their own problem-solving skills." This outside perspective on our family dynamics was exactly what I needed to articulate my own position clearly. I've been supporting Jessica financially and emotionally for 7 years, and she's never become more independent or responsible as a result. Every time I rescue her from consequences, she makes bigger mistakes because she knows I'll fix them. Sarah's manipulative tears began flowing as she played her final emotional card. "I can't believe my own son would choose strangers over his own blood. Your father would be heartbroken to see how selfish you've become." But instead of the crushing guilt I usually felt at the mention of my father, I felt anger at their willingness to weaponize his memory. Dad would want me to build a life I'm proud of, not sacrifice my future to enable Jessica's irresponsibility. After the confrontation at my office, my family's manipulation campaign escalated to levels I had never experienced before. Within hours of returning home, my phone was buzzing with calls from relatives I hadn't heard from in years, each one delivering carefully scripted messages about family loyalty and the importance of supporting Jessica during her crisis. My Aunt Linda called first, her voice dripping with disappointed authority. Monroe, your mother told me about your situation with Jessica. I'm shocked that you would abandon your sister when she needs you most. Your parents raised you better than this. And frankly, I'm embarrassed to have a nephew who could be so heartless. The coordinated nature of these calls became obvious when my Uncle Robert used almost identical phrases 20 minutes later. Monroe, I'm calling because I'm concerned about your recent behavior. Family is everything, son. You can't just turn your back on blood when times get tough. Jessica looks up to you, and you're destroying her faith in family bonds. Each relative had clearly been briefed with a one-sided version of events that painted me as the villain in Jessica's story. They knew about her job loss and housing crisis, but none of them had been informed about the years of financial support I had provided, the property damage from her previous stays, or the fact that she had never once expressed gratitude for my help. My cousin Amanda's call was the most manipulative because she used our previously close relationship to maximize emotional impact. Monroe, I can't believe what I'm hearing about you lately. Remember when we used to talk about how important family was? You used to be the most caring, generous person I knew. What happened to you? The implication that my desire for independence represented a fundamental character flaw was designed to make me doubt my own judgment and fall back into familiar patterns of people-pleasing. But my weeks of peaceful living had given me enough emotional stability to recognize these tactics for what they were: weapons deployed to control my behavior when direct demands had failed. Sarah's approach became more sophisticated as the day progressed. She left a series of voicemails that painted vivid pictures of Jessica's suffering, each one carefully designed to trigger my guilt and rescue instincts. Monroe, I just wanted to let you know that Jessica is sleeping in her car tonight because all the shelters are full. She's scared and alone, eating convenience store food because she can't afford restaurants. I keep thinking about how different things could be if her own brother just showed a little compassion. Frank's messages focused on attacking my masculinity and challenging my identity as a successful, responsible person. Monroe, real men take care of their families. You've got more money than the rest of us, and you're using it to live some selfish bachelor lifestyle while your sister suffers. That's not the man I thought I was helping to raise. But Jessica's approach was the most calculated and potentially dangerous. She had somehow discovered Emma's social media profiles and sent her a lengthy message that portrayed me as someone having a mental health crisis who needed intervention from people who cared about his well-being. Hi, Emma. Jessica's message began. I'm Monroe's sister, and I'm reaching out because I'm really worried about him. He's been acting completely out of character lately, making impulsive decisions and cutting off contact with his family. I think he might be having some kind of breakdown, and he needs support from friends like you who care about him. Emma forwarded Jessica's message to me immediately, which backfired spectacularly on my family's manipulation campaign. Instead of creating doubt about my mental state, Jessica's contact with Emma revealed the extent of my family's willingness to interfere in my personal relationships to get what they wanted. Emma and I spent the evening discussing the message, and her psychology background helped her identify the manipulation tactics my family was using. This is textbook emotional blackmail, she explained. They're trying to isolate you from support systems and make you doubt your own judgment by suggesting you're mentally unstable. Her clear analysis of my family's behavior patterns helped me understand dynamics I had been too close to recognize. Emma pointed out how my family had trained me to prioritize their needs over my own well-being, then labeled any attempt at independence as selfishness or mental illness. Healthy families support each other's growth and independence, Emma said. They don't try to sabotage your relationships or professional reputation when you make decisions they disagree with. I decided to start documenting everything systematically. I saved screenshots of Jessica's message to Emma, recorded the voicemails from relatives, and created a timeline of demands and threats from my family over the past year. The pattern that emerged was clear. They viewed my success and stability as resources they were entitled to access whenever they faced problems. While organizing this documentation, I researched housing resources, job placement services, and social services available for people in Jessica's situation. I compiled a comprehensive list of practical solutions that could help her build independence rather than continuing to depend on family rescue operations. Mrs. Patterson called me that evening with information that confirmed my family's willingness to manipulate others to achieve their goals. Monroe, I wanted you to know that your parents came by the building again today. They've been telling other tenants that you're having a mental breakdown, and they're trying to help you. They even asked the building manager about getting access to your old apartment for an intervention. This news crystallized my understanding that my family would never respect boundaries through gentle conversation or reasonable discussion. They viewed my independence as a problem to be solved, rather than a right to be respected, and they were willing to damage my reputation and relationships to force me back into compliance. I realized that half measures and gradual boundary setting would never work with people who were determined to maintain control over my life. I needed to take decisive action that forced them to confront the reality of my independence, while protecting my new relationship with Emma and my professional reputation. The intervention Mrs. Patterson mentioned gave me an idea for turning their manipulation tactics against them. If they wanted a family meeting to discuss my behavior, I would give them exactly what they asked for, but on my terms and with witnesses who could provide objective perspective on our family dynamics. I spent the next morning preparing for the family intervention my parents had scheduled at my old apartment, but instead of being their victim, I decided to use their ambush as my opportunity to establish permanent boundaries with witnesses present. I invited Emma to accompany me for emotional support, and surprisingly, I asked David if he would attend as a neutral observer who had witnessed my family's manipulative behavior firsthand. David agreed immediately, explaining that he had learned valuable lessons from his own experience with demanding family members and wanted to support someone else going through similar challenges. Setting boundaries with family is one of the hardest things you'll ever do, he said, but it's essential for building a healthy adult life. I prepared a comprehensive response that addressed every manipulation tactic while offering practical solutions that focused on helping Jessica develop independence rather than continuing to enable her dependence on others. I organized my documentation chronologically, showing a clear pattern of demands, threats, and boundary violations that had escalated whenever I tried to establish any autonomy. The intervention was scheduled for 2 p.m. at my old apartment, and I had Emma and David meet me in the building lobby at 1:50 so we could enter together. I wanted my family to understand immediately that I was no longer the isolated, guilt-ridden person they expected to manipulate through collective pressure. When we walked into my former living room, the setup was exactly what I had predicted. Sarah and Frank sat on opposite ends of the couch with Jessica between them, creating a united front of family disappointment. Dr. Richards, the family counselor they had hired, occupied the single chair with a clipboard and professional expression that suggested he had been thoroughly briefed with their version of events. My entrance with Emma and David immediately shifted the power dynamic in the room. My family had prepared emotional speeches designed to overwhelm a guilty, isolated Monroe who felt ashamed of his choices. Instead, they faced a confident man supported by people who respected his decisions and understood healthy relationship dynamics. "Thank you all for coming," I said calmly, taking a position where I could see everyone while Emma and David flanked me supportively. "I appreciate the opportunity to address your concerns about my recent decisions." Dr. Richards cleared his throat and consulted his notes. "Monroe, your family is worried about some significant changes in your behavior lately. They've described patterns of isolation, rejection of family responsibilities, and what seems to be abandonment of core values they believed you shared." Instead of defending myself against their accusations, I pulled out my documentation and placed it on the coffee table. "Dr. Richards, before we discuss my behavior, I'd like to share some context about our family dynamics that might help you understand the situation more completely." I began with a timeline of financial support I had provided Jessica over the past 7 years. Rent payments, car repairs, credit card debt, legal fees, and emergency loans that were never repaid. The total amount was staggering even to me when calculated comprehensively. These numbers show a pattern of financial dependence that has prevented Jessica from developing independence, I explained. Every time I rescued her from consequences, she made bigger mistakes because she knew I would fix them. Frank interrupted aggressively. "Those numbers don't tell the whole story. Family helps family, and you were in a position to provide support when Jessica needed it." David spoke up for the first time, his calm professionalism contrasting sharply with Frank's emotional intensity. Actually, Frank, those numbers suggest a pattern that psychologists call enabling behavior. Constantly rescuing someone from consequences prevents them from developing problem-solving skills and personal responsibility. Sarah turned her attention to Emma with manipulative concern. Emma, dear, I hope you understand that Monroe hasn't always been this cold and calculating. He used to be such a caring, generous person before he started making these selfish decisions. Emma responded with confidence that surprised everyone, including me. I've seen Monroe's caring and generosity in how he treats friends, colleagues, and me. The difference is that healthy relationships are built on mutual respect rather than one-sided obligation. Dr. Richards asked probing questions about family loyalty and obligation, clearly expecting me to express guilt about prioritizing my own needs. Instead, I asked him about the psychology of healthy boundary setting and the importance of encouraging independence rather than dependence. Dr. Richards, in your professional experience, what happens to adults who never face consequences for poor decisions because family members consistently rescue them? His answer was exactly what I hoped for. Typically, they don't develop crucial life skills and continue making poor choices because they don't experience the natural results of their actions. I then presented my practical solutions, a comprehensive list of resources for Jessica, including job placement services, affordable housing options, mental health support, and social services designed to help people transition to independence. I offered to pay for her apartment deposit and first month's rent if she committed to job searching and accepted responsibility for maintaining her housing. These resources provide genuine help that builds independence rather than continued dependence, I explained. I'm willing to support Jessica's growth, but I won't enable her avoidance of adult responsibilities. My family rejected these offerings immediately, demanding instead that I simply house Jessica indefinitely without any expectations for her contribution or personal growth. Their reaction proved my point about the difference between helping and enabling better than any argument I could have made. Jessica broke down crying, but her tears seemed calculated rather than genuine. Monroe, you used to care about me. Now you're treating me like some kind of charity case instead of your sister. I need my brother right now, not a social worker. I do care about you, Jessica, I replied. That's exactly why I'm offering resources that will help you build a stable life instead of continuing to rescue you from every crisis. Caring about someone sometimes means disappointing them in the short term to help them grow in the long term. Frank made one final attempt at intimidation. If you don't help your sister, you're no longer welcome in this family. We'll cut off all contact and remove you from any inheritance. You'll be dead to us. The threat that would have devastated me just months earlier now felt like liberation. I understand that's your choice to make, Frank. I love my family, but I won't allow fear of rejection to control my decisions about how to live my life. Dr. Richards had clearly expected a very different dynamic, and his questions began shifting toward curiosity about my perspective rather than pressure to conform to family expectations. By the end of the session, even he seemed to understand that my boundaries were reasonable rather than selfish. I concluded the meeting by giving them my new contact information and establishing clear guidelines for future communication. I'm available for family relationships built on mutual respect. I won't engage with manipulation, guilt trips, or attempts to control my living situation. You're welcome to contact me when you're ready to treat me as an adult who has the right to make his own decisions. 6 months later, my life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined during those tense family meetings and manipulation campaigns. The decision to maintain firm boundaries while offering practical support had created space for genuine growth in all of our relationships, though the path to healing had required patience and consistency that tested my resolve countless times. The first few weeks after the intervention were exactly as difficult as I had anticipated. My family maintained their threats of permanent estrangement, recruited additional relatives to pressure me into changing my position, and continued painting me as the villain in Jessica's ongoing housing crisis. But Emma and David's support, combined with the peace of my apartment sanctuary, gave me strength to weather their emotional storms without compromising my boundaries. The breakthrough began when Jessica, faced with genuine homelessness and no rescue coming from her brother, actually started using the comprehensive resource list I had provided. She moved into a shared apartment with 2 roommates, found work at a retail store that offered steady hours and benefits, and enrolled in evening classes at the community college to develop marketable skills. The transformation in Jessica's attitude happened gradually as she discovered her own capability and resilience. Without the safety net of my automatic rescue, she was forced to solve problems independently and began experiencing the satisfaction that comes from personal achievement. Her text messages shifted from complaints about unfair circumstances to updates about small victories, getting promoted to shift supervisor, passing her first college exam, and saving enough money to buy a reliable used car. 3 months after the intervention, Jessica called me directly instead of going through our parents. Her voice carried a maturity I had never heard before as she thanked me for the resource list and apologized for years of taking my support for granted. "Monroe, I need to tell you something that's been bothering me," she said during our first real conversation in years. "I always knew that having you as backup made it easier to make risky decisions. If something went wrong, I could just call you to fix it. I never developed any problem-solving skills because I didn't need them." Her acknowledgement of our unhealthy dynamic was the first step toward building a genuine sibling relationship based on mutual respect rather than one-sided obligation. We began meeting for coffee every few weeks, and I was amazed to discover Jessica had interesting thoughts and genuine ambitions when she wasn't consumed with managing whatever crisis had brought her to my doorstep. My parents' adjustment took longer and required more patience, but eventually they began recognizing that my independence had produced positive results for everyone involved. Sarah initially maintained that I had been cruel to force Jessica into homelessness, but as she witnessed Jessica's growing confidence and stability, her perspective gradually shifted. "I have to admit," Sarah said during one of our careful conversations, "Jessica seems happier than she's been in years. She talks about her job and classes with real pride, and she's not calling me every day with emergencies anymore." Frank's transformation was the most dramatic because my firm boundaries forced him to confront his own assumptions about masculinity and family responsibility. He eventually admitted that his demands for me to constantly rescue Jessica had been motivated by his own guilt about not providing better guidance when she was younger. "I thought being a man meant fixing everyone else's problems," he said during a conversation that surprised us both with its honesty. But watching Jessica succeed on her own made me realize that maybe helping her too much was actually hurting her growth. My relationship with Emma flourished in an environment free from family drama and constant crisis management. My increased emotional availability and confidence strengthened our connection in ways that convinced me she was someone I wanted to build a future with. Emma had seen me handle family manipulation with maturity and grace, which gave her confidence in my ability to maintain healthy boundaries in all areas of life. Professionally, my promotion came through exactly as David had predicted. My improved focus and emotional stability had translated into exceptional work performance, and my supervisor recognized leadership potential that had been hidden under years of family-related stress. The promotion included a significant salary increase that validated my decision to prioritize my career development over constant family emergencies. The most profound change was internal. I had learned the difference between helping and enabling, between love and manipulation, and between family loyalty and family dysfunction. My apartment remained a sanctuary where I could pursue personal interests, maintain healthy relationships, and make decisions based on my own values rather than other people's expectations. I hosted a small dinner party in my apartment 6 months after the intervention, and the contrast with previous family gatherings was remarkable. Jessica attended and shared stories about her job and academic progress with genuine enthusiasm. My parents were respectful guests who admired the space I had created and acknowledged their pride in my independence, rather than complaining about my lack of availability for crisis management. Emma fit seamlessly into this healthier family dynamic because our relationships were now built on mutual respect rather than obligation and guilt. She could see the love that existed between us once the toxic dynamics had been addressed, and my family could appreciate Emma's positive influence on my confidence and happiness. The final validation of my decision came during a quiet conversation with Jessica as we cleaned up after dinner. "Monroe, I need you to know something," she said as we worked side by side in my kitchen. "This is the first time in my adult life that I feel proud of who I am instead of ashamed of what I need from other people. You gave me the greatest gift possible when you refused to keep rescuing me. Standing on my balcony later that evening with Emma beside me, I reflected on the journey from that Sunday dinner announcement to this moment of genuine family peace. My secret apartment had become the foundation for authentic relationships built on respect rather than manipulation, love rather than obligation, and mutual support rather than one-sided sacrifice. I had learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is disappoint people in the short term to help them grow in the long term. Setting boundaries had not destroyed my family relationships. It had forced them to evolve into healthier forms that honored everyone's autonomy and dignity. The view from my balcony overlooked a city full of possibilities, and I knew that the life I was building with Emma would be based on the solid foundation of self-respect and healthy boundaries. My family had learned to respect my choices because I had finally learned to respect myself enough to make them. Justice had been served not through revenge or punishment, but through natural consequences that allowed everyone to discover their own strength and capability. My parents learned that love means supporting independence rather than demanding dependence. Jessica discovered her own resilience and potential, and I learned that true family relationships can only exist between equals who choose to support each other rather than people who feel obligated to sacrifice themselves. The greatest lesson of all was understanding that you cannot save people who will not save themselves, but you can create space for them to discover their own power when you stop enabling their helplessness. My secret apartment had been the key to unlocking authentic relationships with the people I loved most, proving that sometimes the most courageous act of love is simply refusing to participate in dysfunction anymore. What would you do if your family assumed they could make major decisions about your life without asking your permission? Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace and maintaining your independence? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life experiences about family dynamics and personal growth. Share this story with anyone who might be struggling with similar boundary issues in their own families. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it helps you find the courage to create the life you deserve, even when it means disappointing people who claim to love you.